Have you ever stopped to think about time? What if time didn't flow the way we know it? Imagine 1 second. Now imagine that single second lasting 1,000 years. Today, we're going to explore what would happen if time slowed down, almost to a stop. If 1 second lasted 1,000 years, human perception would stop making sense. Movement would feel impossible. A blink would take centuries. Conversations would freeze. Every gesture, every sound, every glance would be locked in an infinite present. The world would look like a still, eternal painting, where action doesn't exist, only the awareness of waiting and slowness. Reality would become a static visual cycle, where living means only watching time stand still. Light, which normally travels at nearly 300,000 kilometers per second, would appear completely still. A camera flash would last for generations. A sunset would remain fixed in the sky, like a painting that never fades. Beams of light crossing windows would hang suspended in the air, visible and motionless. Everything would seem lit by a frozen eternity. We'd still see the light, but never its end. Suggested visuals: dusty light beams frozen in mid-air, a still sunset on the horizon, eternal shadows cast across the ground. Light, which normally travels at nearly 300,000 kilometers per second, would appear completely still. A camera flash would last for generations. A sunset would remain fixed in the sky, like a painting that never fades. Beams of light crossing windows would hang suspended in the air, visible and motionless. Everything would seem lit by a frozen eternity. We'd still see the light, but never its end. Sound, being a vibration in the air, would no longer be audible. Each note, each word, each beat would hang suspended. A single word would take centuries to complete. The world would plunge into absolute silence. It would feel like living in a vacuum, where the absence of sound becomes an oppressive presence. The only thing left to hear might be your own slow thoughts, if they could still exist at all. With time stretched, Earth would seem suspended. Its rotation, nearly imperceptible, would make days and nights eternal. The sun would stand still in the sky, like an eye that never blinks. Seasons would vanish. Nature would become a frozen stage, where the shadow of a tree lasts for centuries, and the wind never touches your face. The planet would become a living, silent space photograph. The blooming of a flower would take centuries. Animals would freeze mid-leap. The food chain would stop. Nothing would be born, and nothing would die. Nature as we know it would cease to exist. A hummingbird in flight would remain suspended for generations, a living sculpture. Each leaf in the wind would become part of a permanent, unchanging landscape. If the human mind remained active, we'd live imprisoned within our own awareness. Thinking a single sentence would take centuries. Mental experience would become slow and torturous. Subjective time would turn into a prison of sluggish, isolated thought. Loneliness would gain a new meaning. Being awake would mean watching the same instant echo endlessly, without escape. An entire planet would fall into stasis. Simple gestures, like shaking a hand or waving, would take millennia. Entire cities would be frozen in time. Technology would cease to evolve. Culture would pause. We'd become a petrified humanity, a whole world suspended in the moment just before action, with no possibility of resuming. Stars, which already move slowly, would appear absolutely motionless. Constellations would never shift. Comets and meteors would hang frozen in the sky. The universe would become an immense, eternal photo exhibition. With celestial bodies suspended in the vastness, unmoving and untouched. With time nearly stopped, all technology dependent on movement would cease to function. Clocks would halt in an eternal instant. Computers wouldn't process a single bit. Machines would freeze mid-task. The digital age would become a landscape of frozen lights and silent circuits. As if time had turned off the future and left everything suspended in an unchanging present. Without the flow of time, the very concept of future would vanish. There would be no expectations, no plans, no dreams, everything trapped in an eternal now. Timelines would be severed, and destiny replaced by a static, suffocating cycle. Hope, which depends on movement, would fade. All that would remain is the absolute present, where nothing moves forward, and nothing ever ends. Time dilation would affect the entire cosmos. Rotating galaxies would become still spirals. Black holes would appear as frozen windows in space. All matter would stop moving. The dynamic vastness of the universe would be frozen in an eternal moment. Stars on the verge of exploding would take eons to fade. Nothing would move. Nothing would renew. In a world without motion, loneliness would gain a new meaning. It would be existential isolation, where no one moves, speaks, or responds. Each person would be an island of frozen awareness, conscious of the eternity between one breath and the next. No sound. No exchange. No change. A silence so absolute, even thoughts would seem to scream into the void. If time suddenly returned to its normal speed, the world would erupt into chaos. Light, sound, and motion, all would happen instantly. It would feel like waking from an eternal trance into an avalanche of sensations. The human body couldn't handle the transition. Earth would spin, the sun would move, and everything frozen would become a hurricane of accelerated reality. A second may seem insignificant, but stretched to 1,000 years, it becomes an entire life. Eternity can live inside a single moment, if seen through the lens of absolute time. What would you do if every second lasted forever? Maybe the secret isn't racing against time, but understanding what time truly is. The universe is bigger than we can comprehend, and its mysteries are only beginning. Every day, a new video awaits you here. If you're drawn to the unknown, then you're in the right place. Subscribe, and keep exploring the dark side of the cosmos with us.